Dan Griff here, Smashmouth. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing all right. How are you?
I appreciate it. And we'll get into the Leach stuff in a minute, but I'm an NBA guy like you. I love watching this stuff. The draft intrigues me. Look, you know Bama's got a top 10 guy. Scouts told me before, once he got to the individual workout portion of what he does, he would elevate. He's one that's fast rising. What do you think? What do you see? What do you hear about Sexton?
Well, I like Sexton. I like his competitiveness, and he plays with the sort of energy that I think can lift a team through a regular season, and that's really important, especially at the point guard position, because everything sort of funnels from whoever's got the ball in their hands. Having said that, all of these prospects, and in this draft particularly, once you get really starting at number one, all of these guys are going to either be really good or just sort of standard NBA players based on whether they are able to fix their weaknesses. And for Collin Sexton, there's no question he's got to shoot the ball better. If he's going to be a really good point guard in the NBA, he's going to have to put it in the basket, or else he's just going to be kind of like an Elfrid Payton. I think he's better than Elfrid Payton, but he's going to have to prove it. So it'll be interesting to see. I like him a lot. I think he probably ends up in that 8, 9, 10 range, and I'm sure it'll be a special night for him and his family.
Yeah, and we watched him all year, obviously. And the thing I noticed that jumps out, obviously he's raw. He's a freshman in college, but his shot, there's not a lot to fix. He's got a mid-range game. He's got that competitive you talked about. He doesn't defend every possession, but he's capable of it. He's got the body. So really the sky's the limit with the raw stuff you see. You agree or no?
Well, look, I mean, all these guys who are in the top 8, 10 prospects in this draft are really good and have pretty high ceilings. Now, I don't know if Collin Sexton is destined to be a top 5 point guard in the NBA. I think that would be probably a little bit ambitious. But he can be a good starter if he maxes out his potential. And, from here on out in all these guys' careers, it's just so hard to guess. That's why the draft is such a crapshoot. And we look back every single draft 3 or 4 years later, and I was watching old ESPN drafts this week just to see what the commentators were saying, about some of these picks. And now with the benefit of hindsight, so much of it was ridiculous. But for now, these guys are kind of blank slates. There's a lot of hope, and the team that picks them is going to be really happy. But look, I mean, I think if he maxes out on what he can do, he'll be a good starter on a good team.
That's interesting because most say better than that. But as you know, these things happen out of nowhere. Nobody expected it from Curry, although he was a top 15 pick. Derek Lillard, I mean, you can come out of nowhere and have those intangibles that make you great. And there's been other guys, as you know, that had all the qualifications that flounder around, as you talked about.
Well, the thing is, point guard is probably the most competitive position in the NBA. I mean, every team, for the most part, has a decent point guard. Now, there's some guys who or some teams that probably could use a better one or don't have one. Orlando, and that's why you've heard about them, for instance, taking a point guard at the 6th pick. But to get in that top, 3-4 point guards in the NBA, I mean, think about who that is. You're talking like a Chris Paul level player. Chris Paul is going to be in the Hall of Fame one day. So, Collin Sexton, I like a lot, but to sit here today and say he's going to be a Hall of Fame level type player by the end of his career, I just can't wrap my mind around that yet. But we'll see.
Yeah, and a lot's dependent on him, obviously, because again, the skill set is there. But what you don't,
that's always with all the kids, yeah.
Right. But like you and like Jay Billis said, and I had his quote last week, there's no more competitive guy in the draft than him. And KG talked to Avery Johnson about it and said the guy's got some dog in him. You know what I mean? He's got that. So there is that, which could the primo word there, elevate him. It's going to depend on that, I think.
Well, Travis Schlenk, who's the general manager here in Atlanta, it was quoted earlier this year talking about the draft that the hardest thing to figure out as a team evaluating players is what drives them. There are some guys who get to the NBA and they're just happy to make the league. They're happy to, get the big paycheck and be able to buy their mom a car or a house. And that's about all the development that they're going to do. There are other guys who, what they're playing for is that second contract. And then after that, and they really get the big money, then they kind of level off. And then there's some guys who, what really drives them is, to be an all-star or to be a 10-time all-star. And that will all determine the development arc for all these young players who change a lot mentally and physically between the ages of 18, 19, 20, and then 24, 25, 26 when they're entering their prime. So it's so tough to project, and it's why so many teams make mistakes.
Dan Wolken, our guest USA Today. Look, when I look at this thing from afar and my casual way of looking at it, I think it's a really good, deep draft. Am I wrong? Is that your feel?
I don't know.
At least the top 15. At least the top 15, maybe.
Yeah, I feel like we kind of say that every year, and sometimes it turns out to be true. Like this last year, I think it was actually true. You look at the guys who were drafted a year ago, and it's early in the process, and they're not all finished products, but just the early returns from their rookie years. I mean, you can go on down the list. Guys who were drafted in the teens, a couple guys who were drafted in the 20s. They all look like they have a chance to be good NBA players. So last year, I would say, has turned out to be a deep draft. This one, I don't know yet. I think a lot of what's driving that conversation is that the top 8 to 9 picks seem to be similar, seem to be about the same level of talent. Now, that will either mean that it's a deep draft or it means that they're all roughly kind of mediocre. It's too soon to tell.
And we segue into this conversation about one and done. That's a lot of the problem on why this is hard to decipher by the league, right?
Well, sure. I mean, back, in the 80s, the NBA and college basketball, the games were more similar, and the players were adults. Now the players are really, really young, and so they obviously have more development to go before they really become what they're going to be as players in the NBA. So it's harder to get a feel for that in 1 year. A lot of it, too, is system. Think about you're evaluating the Duke guys. Well, they had, I think, 4 one-and-dones, or Kentucky. So they're all playing with each other, and so you've got to figure out whether the system maybe hid some of their good qualities, or maybe made them look, or maybe maybe hid some of their bad qualities. It's really tough for these guys to figure it out, and it's only going to get tougher in about 3 years when the high school players come back into the draft.
So we need to. What's your feel? Will we get away from it? At least go to 2 and done, or to me, the perfect thing's the way baseball does it. You can go out of high school. If you don't, you can't go to after your junior year. That seems to be the perfect deal for any sport.
I disagree. I like the hockey model, and the hockey model is that you don't ever enter the NHL draft. The team will pick you whenever they're ready to pick you. And then if you want to go back to college, you go back to college. Or if the team says, we want to secure your rights, but we don't think you're ready to be a pro, you go back to college, and then we'll sign you in a year or two. That is, I think, the optimal way to do it. Obviously, there's some complications and things you'd have to deal with from agent rules and all that stuff. But I like letting kids develop at their own pace and not necessarily forcing them into adulthood too early. But I also understand that sometimes it's a risk to play in college if you don't have a draft position or you don't have a contract. So that's how I would prefer to do it. But I think what we're headed toward is probably something like you can go out of high school, but if you go to college, you got to stay for 2 years.
Dan Wolken, our guest here, talking a little basketball and college football. Your thoughts on the transfer deal that came out from the NCAA and college football? I had an interesting feel for it and take. I was curious about just your general off the top of the head deal on the transfer rule and the October 15th date being in the middle of the year.
Well, I think it's going to be a little bit overblown. I think it's summertime. We haven't had a lot of things going on this year, not a lot of big controversies. So everyone's focused on this. I mean, really, I think most coaches would tell you that when a player has it in their mind or when they've decided to transfer, when they come in to the coach's office and ask for that permission to contact form, that the kid already knows they're gone, and usually the coach already knows they're gone. I don't think this will change much. It's just, okay, you're going to transfer. Now the school that you're leaving can't restrict where you're going to go, which, look, the only reason we have to do that, or the NCAA has to do that, is because coaches were abusing their power to restrict, and they were doing it for ridiculous reasons. You would have coaches, just for instance, in the SEC, who would arbitrarily restrict a player transferring from going to, the Big 12 and the ACC. I mean, there was no reason to do that. So I blame the coaches for abusing that leeway that they had, and so now we're taking it away from them.
Yeah, are you good, though, with a backup? There's so many holes in it to me, and I agree with you on the surface, but I don't think they looked at it in its totality, at least this first year, because I see a scenario like at Alabama. Jalen Hurts loses the quarterback position. He's number 2. He knows he's going to graduate in December, let's say. So he's sitting there, and then October 15th, he goes, you know what, I'm going to transfer. I got 2 years left after I graduate. And he starts taking calls from coaches on a list, on a database. He's getting 20, 25 schools looking at him. What if Tua got hurt and he refuses to go in the game because he's thinking, well, I don't want to burn my year of eligibility. I've got 2 now. You see what I'm saying? It could just get nuts this year.
Well, I think you're describing a hypothetical scenario that look, could happen. I think is relatively far-fetched. But
it's a stretch.
The guy wants to leave and is mentally checked out of a school and is already at the planning stage. I mean, you're probably just better off letting him go anyway. I just think that given what we ask of these guys, given that they have no opportunity to profit off their name, image, and likeness, you've got to give ground somewhere. And I think the freedom of movement and certain aspects of transfer rules, you've got to just give ground because, coaches have far too much power right now over where these guys go, and you only have as a player a limited amount of time, and especially as a quarterback. Like, these guys all end up going to schools and have 4 or 5 years to play. If they get stuck behind somebody, I especially don't blame quarterbacks for wanting to leave because only one person gets to play.
Yeah. I mean, there's no doubt that's a no-brainer. That's why 13 quarterbacks at Alabama in Saban's tenure have transferred, and you can't blame them for that. I mean, everybody wants to play. That doesn't mean it's a ding at the school like a lot of fans think. It just means I want to go play somewhere. You
only get one shot at it. And so I sympathize with the players in that regard.
All right, before you go, you've had some kind of crazy deal. What is happening here with Mike Leach? I mean, he's blocking you, but he wants to debate you. And
yeah, I mean, I think this is pretty simple. Yeah, this is pretty simple. Okay, Mike Leach is a bit of a loose cannon. I think we all know that. And his sort of rants, going off the reservation, his unpredictability, has long limited his job prospects. I think everybody understands Mike Leach is a really football coach. Mike Leach, Texas Tech, he's won Washington State. Those are tough places. And I would argue that any sort of normal person with his resume would be the target of a lot of high-profile schools. But for a long time, those schools have always been wary of the wackiness. They've been wary of, his lack of discipline, his inability to focus. And things like last year, he's on Twitter inciting people at Texas Tech to go picket games on his behalf. just, weird stuff. And schools get scared about that. They don't like that sort of unpredictability. They don't like that sort of the coach potentially embarrassing the school. And so I wrote a column when he tweeted this Barack Obama conspiracy that had been totally debunked on Sunday night, and put it on his Twitter account, sort of passive-aggressively said, do you agree or disagree? Let's have a debate. Maybe we can learn something. Well, I mean, he wasn't looking to have a debate. He was looking to post something that was anti-Obama to stir up something, which, look, I mean, if he wants to use his Twitter account to talk politics, Mike Leach can have at it. But he put a purposely false piece of propaganda out there, and as a representative of the university, you just can't do that. And not only did he put it out there, he wouldn't back away from it, even when confronted with evidence that it was fake and misleading and totally inappropriate. He defended it. And so I wrote a column saying, hey, this is just another example of why all these schools have kind of passed on Mike Leach, and he didn't like it. And so then he started tweeting at me last night saying he doesn't know who I am, which is not true. Saying he wants to have a debate. I don't really know what he wants to debate. What's there to debate? So he, I don't know.
Yeah, we're buying tickets to that, or how does that work exactly?
I mean, listen, I know he's a politically active guy, and he's made no bones about where he stands on certain things, and that's cool. But I'm not here to debate Mike Leach about healthcare policy and immigration. That's not what I do. I'm a sports columnist, and if he wants me to debate him about whether he's too wacky for a school like Alabama, or whether it's a good idea for college football coaches to put hoaxes on their Twitter account, I'm happy to have that debate. I mean, I think my position was pretty clear. I just don't know that that's a debate he would really want to have.
Yeah, hopefully it dies down. I mean, it's kind of fun for us looking at it. I know you take it kind of tongue-in-cheek and different things, but I certainly see what you're saying, because with his offensive mind is so unbelievable, and he's had so many tributaries of other coaches that have gone on to use his stuff to be successful. It really is amazing that he's not at a higher profile place, like you said. There has to be a reason.
Well, just look at the offensive numbers, and quarterback after quarterback after quarterback goes in there and is able to put up yards and score points. And so his system clearly works, and it's changed over the years, and he's run the ball more. And he's absolutely an offensive genius, but schools have long been intrigued by what he might be able to do at a place where it's easier to recruit and easier to win. But
right.
They've never been able to get over that hump of actually wanting to hire him because they're afraid of all the other stuff that comes with it.